We were talking about mosques being used as a radicalization tool, but it seems like the internet is actually a more effective way to radicalize people, especially outside of ISIS. So how could we maybe curb the radicalization online again without infringing on everybody's rights in the process?
Well, you actually can't stop online terrorism in the way that we would like to. If ISIS or whatever terror organization is intelligent about it, there are so many methods that you can hide behind, like the Tor network, other forms of identity masking that in reality you could hide forever. And is as good as an FBI hacker may be, once you hide behind several layers of Tor, you just cannot be found. And if that's what they start doing, then there really is no way to track them.
Peter?
Well, I want to stop and not further demonize encryption. Because encryption is a tool that many of us use to protect ourselves against government intrusion. It arguably could follow the gun control argument. People buy guns to legitimately protect themselves and go hunting, and people use encryption for both legitimate and illegitimate purposes. It's a tool, and I think I bring that up only because John Brennan and others in the American law enforcement community have used the Paris tragedy as an excuse to argue that we should not be allowed to have encryption, that if the NSA the NSA should be able to read anything that's encrypted out there. The cross between safety and freedom is largely at the heart of all of these discussions, and it certainly is in play when you talk about censoring the internet, which is indeed what we're talking about. There are laws that have been in place for a very long time that have served us. If I put up a website saying, kill the pigs, and include in great detail how using police methods you can stalk and assassinate police officers, there are plenty of laws that govern that. And I can be arrested, the website can be shut down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I put up a website that says, I hate the police, and I really could care less if bad things happen to them, that is not terrorism. It's not anything. In fact, it falls clearly inside the boundaries of legitimate speech. The same way a governor saying, if we let Syrian refugees into our state, they're going to cause trouble, and that stirs up all the right-wing hatred in his state, and he knows that, and incidents do happen. So if we want to fight ISIS online or anywhere else, we simply have to use the tools that are available, and we have to, more importantly, use persuasive arguments against that radicalization. There's a concept called the gray zone, which posits that a number of, in this case we're talking about Muslims, a number of Muslims exist in a gray zone between two competing forces, those that want to assimilate them and those who want to radicalize them. And that for the majority of Muslims, but there's all these people that are caught in this gray zone that we are competing for with ISIS. We have to be very conscious of this, and we have to make sure that we're successfully competing for them, not simply by trying to play whack-a-mole with ISIS Twitter accounts, but in better sense, having a broader society that welcomes them and wants them to assimilate, rather than either a counter-narrative that says, ISIS is bad, stay away from them, or an even stronger counter-narrative that says, you're not wanted in 30 of our 50 states.
Well, aside from attacking ISIS and the flow of ISIS members into Europe, how do we stop young Muslim men just from being recruited into these terror networks? We're seeing some staggering numbers out of France and Belgium. Just 440 or more people just from Belgium have fled to fight for ISIS in Syria. Peter, how do we curb the radicalization of, and it's usually, it's the same type of person. It's a young Muslim man who usually comes from a crappy area of town, and he's disillusioned. A lot of them were, we saw a couple of them had, criminal records. Some of them, had Facebook accounts with photos of them drinking. How do we stop these people who aren't naturally going to gravitate towards radical Islam from being drawn into it?
Well, you just said the answer, really, which is to bring them from the opposite of all those positions, the disillusionment, things like that. ISIS offers these folks a number of things that we have to look very deeply into ourselves and say, well, why are those messages resonating with these young people? ISIS offers a religious view, and religion has always been a very powerful motivator to bring people into a fight. Secondarily, ISIS offers an anti-Western and anti-imperialist message, which is also very persuasive. If you are raised as a minority in a Western society, if you are made fun of, if you are told on a regular basis that your religion is one of terrorism, if you see activities where people desecrate your religious books, smear feces on the door of your mosque, as we saw in Texas this week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, you're denied job opportunities because of the color of your skin or your religion. Well, you become very, very susceptible to an outside message that says we, ISIS, have a solution to your situation. At the same time, we're going to offer you excitement, adventure, your own machine gun, a chance to go play G.I. Joe. Some of those messages are not dissimilar from the same recruitment messages that are used anywhere in the world to draw young people enthusiastically into the military. And those are need to be countered. If you can't counter them by making changes in society, you are going to have to understand that disillusioned people are going to step out of society and into an environment where they feel more welcome and can strike back against the people they felt harmed them.
You know, we saw the family of the so-called mastermind of the Paris attacks say that, you know, he was a perfectly normal guy, and then a couple of years ago he traveled to Syria and came back completely different and very radicalized. We saw the three brothers that were involved in the attacks at the stadium. Their family said that, you know, they're totally normal, and then, you know, little by little they changed. How do we stop these people who lead totally normal lives from all of a sudden falling into the call of radical Islam, Eric?
I think if we knew the answer, it would be solved. But I think it starts by instilling role models into those communities where required. That could be in the form of people that, you know, successful Muslims that have accomplished things. It could be helping them get an education and achieve things. In some form, we need to provide these influential people, or sorry, the people that can be easily influenced, with some form of aid. When they travel to the Middle East, you know, they're shown that when they die, they'll have all the virgins. They're shown guns. They're given money. They're told that they can, you know, succeed and achieve anything as long as they attack the West. We need to stop that from happening in the first place by making them appreciate the West a little more.
And just to go back to the area where these guys were from, at least three of the attackers came from the suburb of Brussels called Molenbeek, and some of the people involved in the past attacks and attempts in Paris were also from the same area. You know, the immediate response was to immediately start bombing Raqqa targets, ISIS targets in Raqqa. What can we do to, you know, target these specific types of neighborhoods where it seems like they pose a much bigger threat than any, you know, jihadi in Raqqa might pose to the Europe, Peter?
Well, it sounds like, I apologize, it sounds like the police are coming for me here, which in fact may be the case. I'll try to keep
judging by your shirt, you just went through a prison break.
Well, I want to be prepared, so I've dressed the part. But you know, when I was in Iraq, whenever some of the bad guys were captured, their cell phones inevitably had videos on them of the Abu Ghraib pictures. They had videos showing American bombings and things like that. I mean, their inspiration was not hard to figure out. The French strikes against Raqqa shut the city's lights off. They shut the city's water supply off, and are very likely to make life very unpleasant for the 200,000 people who live in that city. Now, of those 200,000, a very small number are actually ISIS people, if you will, but a very large number just came to a new opinion on the West. So the ideas that Eric mentioned are very important and part of a solution, but a larger solution has to be global and has to say, are we contributing to the radicalization? Let's look at Paris. The attacks on Paris were not about killing 150 people. Their deaths are tragic, but that's not what ISIS wanted to do. They weren't hoping to kill 150 or 200 or whatever. They were hoping to kill enough people to bring out the reactions that we, in fact, have seen. Essentially, martial law in Paris, a new commitment by France to get deeper involved in the wars in the Middle East, some hot-ass rhetoric out of the United States, anti-immigrant sentiments here and there. That is what they wanted to accomplish out of that tragedy. And unfortunately, we keep handing the terrorists exactly what they want. Take a look back at 9/11. Bin Laden, we know from the things that he's written and things that he said, thought he was going to provoke the United States to make a attack on Afghanistan, a limited attack on Afghanistan, and he hoped that would inflame enough Muslims to carry his message forward. When the United States turned around with a full-on invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, followed by the invasion of Iraq, followed by a global war on terror, I mean, this is like the terrorist's wet dream. They can't succeed without us, and we have to stop playing into their hands and making it easy for them.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that all these years have been calling Fox News the conservative propaganda channel. It's inadvertently been functioning as an ISIS propaganda channel.